Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, today's video, we are talking about how to make your space feel dark and moody. This is a compliment to last week's video, which was how to make your space feel light and bright and airy. And I said in that video, and I'll say it again. It's a good idea when you're designing your space to start by thinking of the mood that you want to create in the space. And that's why I created these two videos, because these are two sort of common moods that people are looking for, right? They want either light, bright, airy, fun, whatever, and they want dark, moody, mysterious, sexy, romantic. You know what I mean? People want two different, well, they want lots of different things, but those are kind of two things that are very different. So I wanted to build, make a couple of videos on the subject. So that's what this video is. If you want to see last videos, I'm going to link it at the end of this video. By the way, if you subscribe to my newsletter, The Interior Scoop, you will have already seen that I touched on this topic in written form. I can write too. I don't just talk to a camera now. I actually put keys to keyboard. So go check out the link in the description. You can check that out too for every week. Fun little tips and quips and things coming in your inbox. Okay, well, you may be interested in how to make your home really dark and moody. Nobody wants shady internet actors stealing and hoarding their personal information. That's why I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Icogni. If you're online as much as I am, which is like near constant at this point, you might notice that after signing up for an online store's membership account, you start getting spam emails or calls. And it's because these businesses actually sell your personal information to what are called data brokers. Now, data brokers collect information like your name, online aliases, any home addresses, or maybe even your social security number, to be honest. And all of this is then made available for purchase by businesses that could fall into the hands of criminals. And that's where Icogni steps in. Icogni is a service that you permit to go out and remove you from the junk mail of the internet. They work by reaching out to data brokers and asking to remove your data from their lists. You can stay up to date with how many of the requests have been sent and how many lists you have been removed from. So if you're looking to rid the internet of all your data to getting in the wrong hands, use my code Nick Lewis and get 60% off an annual plan. Thanks to Icogni again for sponsoring today's video and supporting the channel. And let's get back to tips on making your home dark and moody. Okay, first up on my list, first tip is going to be choosing dark and muted color for your space. I know you're thinking, oof, hot tip with this one. This guy's good. He says how to make a place feel dark and moody, and he's like, pick dark colors. Okay, I hear you, valid criticism, but here's what I want to explain. I want to talk about tints, tones, and shades again, because you know I love to. And I want to talk about LRV when it comes to paint colors, because you know I love doing that too. And that's what we're going to talk about right now, because I don't think people really understand these concepts a little bit when they're choosing colors for their home. So if you want to build a space that's dark and moody, I would say going for colors that are darker shades than sort of those primary hues. So if you've seen my video on how to choose a color palette, you will know this and you'll be well versed. But basically, there's primary hues right in the old color wheel. We're bringing that back from grade 4. And we're saying, okay, there's blue, purple, green, red, whatever, yellow. There are tints, tones, and shades of each color. So oftentimes when people choose a color, they think like red, and they think like cherry red, right? They think red. And that's fine. Red's a lovely color. But if you add white to red, it starts to look more like pink. If you add gray to red, it starts to look really dusty and really sort of grayed out with a slight red undertone. If you add black to red, it starts to become like almost like this dark red wine sort of color, almost like a really dark kind of maroon. It's very interesting, right? So oftentimes people will say things like, I would never decorate with red, because they're like, yeah, I don't want shocking fire engine red on my walls. And I get that. But oftentimes when you're adding black, gray, and white, you're creating different colors that are in the area of the color wheel that is red, but they're oftentimes a lot more nice to look at and a lot more muted and a lot nicer to put in people's homes. Now, if you have a fire engine wall in your bedroom, fabulous. If you love it, as always, put it in your home. I'm just a guy on your phone here as you're sitting there on the subway or whatever you're doing right now, okay? So you don't have to listen to me. But if you're thinking, ooh, I like red, but I don't like whoa red, then playing with those tints, tones, and shades can sort of, and different varieties in the same palette, can create sort of nuance to your color scheme and can also make your space feel really beautiful, incorporating a color like red, which is notoriously difficult to use in design. So when choosing a dark and moody sort of color palette, what are we doing here? We're adding gray and we're adding black. So if you add white, of course, you're gonna make it look really light and pink or whatever. See last week's video. But if you're adding gray or you're adding black, you're gonna create something really dark, moody, and sexy. And a lot of people think dark must be black, must be charcoal. Okay, fine. But actually when you take blue, you can turn it into navy. When you take green, you can turn it into a really lovely dark forest green, right? If you're taking something purple, you can really choose, it can start to look really regal and royal and amazing, right? So you don't have to go for Barney purple. You can go for something a little sexier. You know what I mean? So you're playing with adding black to colors. I'm gonna you link to a color wheel. I mean, people, bring it out from grade 4 again. You can start to see that you can add black and gray to any color on the color wheel and turn it into something really dark and moody and fantastic. So don't just think black or gray. Think of all the different shades and toned down versions of the primary or the different colors on the color wheel. So start to think of how you can add black or gray to create toned down or sort of darker shades of any color on the color wheel. And that's when you can really start to create a beautiful nuanced palette. Now, in terms of LRV, let's talk paint real quick, okay? So LRV, as you learned last week, stands for light reflectance value and reflects on the amount of light that bounces off of the paint colors. All the paint brands, Bayer, whatever, Sherwin-Williams, they all put it on their website, so you can check them out. And what I think is really great here is choosing colors that are going to be on the lower number. So something like black is going to be single digits in terms of how much light it reflects. It tends to absorb the light, it doesn't reflect it back into the space. That's great if you're creating something really gorgeous and dark and moody. You're going to want to choose colors a little bit lower on the LRV. You're probably not going to choose those really bright and light colors because again, that's what we're trying to do in the light and bright space that we talked about last week. So you're really looking at those darker colors. Now that doesn't mean you have to choose everything single digit. You don't have to always just choose black because again, there's nuance in your color palette, right? So you can choose some lighter colors. You just might not necessarily want to go for something really, really bright unless you really want to create some, you know, harsh contrast, in which case go for it. But you know, if choosing something like if you wanted a lighter color to sort of lighten up a space a little bit so you can have a little bit of contrast, you might choose something like Revere Pewter from Benjamin Moore, which is a lovely color that is really sort of a beige kind of, it's not really, doesn't lean too warm, too cool, but it's just a really lovely beige color. But you know, that has an LRV sort of in the mid 50s. And that means it's reflecting about half or 50% of the light back into the rest of the space. So that might be your light color in your space, in your palette, right? But it's not necessarily going to be so blindingly light. It's going to create a little less contrast, and it's again going to really just add to that muted sort of sexy toned down mood that you're trying to create in the space. So choosing those midtones and darker tones when it comes to things like paint is going to make a huge difference. Okay, next up on my list is going to be choosing really rich, gorgeous textures. I think if you're going to go for a really dark, sort of moody sort of space, I love that dark colors really draw in a space. I always say that, you know, I think as humans, we really love to be in sort of big, bright, open spaces, right? That can feel really lovely and feeling really like, you know, it doesn't feel claustrophobic. It feels really open and really airy. We love that. But we also sometimes like to sort of den and be sort of cozy and sort of draw the walls in a little bit more. I always think that, you know, that can be really pleasant and really lovely as well, right? Think of like going to a spa, like everything just feels really sort of dark and everything is drawn in and it's something really comfortable. It's like you're nesting, you know what I mean? Like there's something really comfortable with that. And so I think really lean into that with beautiful textures if you're trying to create this type of sort of look in your own space. So, you know, have fun. Instead of choosing sort of light, kind of gauzy sort of textures like you might see in a light and bright space, you might choose sort of heavier fabrics like velvet or even wool, things like that, like in your rugs or your window treatments, right? Think beautiful, bold pattern tiles in sort of a really gorgeous, darker color. Rich, interesting wallpaper can be really fabulous. Like, I just love when you've got sort of hallways that are in this sort of dark and moody sort of wallpaper. It just really draws in the walls, but not in like a, my space is too small, I'm claustrophobic kind of way, but like more of a, oh, this is really cozy and interesting and mysterious kind of and sexy. And that's kind of like really fun, I think, about creating these types of spaces, right? You don't have to just paint everything white. You're looking at my white walls and going, but you did. Yes, but you don't have to. And I think if you're trying to create that type of space, I think finding ways to draw the walls in and drawing a space in to make it just feel really intimate can be really fun and can create for a really interesting space as well. Okay, next up on my list is going to be indirect lighting. So this I think is really important because I'm going to talk about lighting a couple of different ways because lighting is so important to, I think, creating this amazing look. First of all, let's talk about natural versus artificial light, right? So natural light's going to come from your windows. And again, I don't know where you live. You could live in a basement suite where you got like a tiny little sliver of a window there and you want to coax in whatever light you have, or you might have a space that's got really big, beautiful open windows, you know, and you're already kind of thinking of, okay, I want a dark and moody space, but what do I do with all these windows, right? So window treatments are going to be your friend here in order to really filter out that light, because I think it's really important here that we're going to filter some of the light that's coming in through those natural sources, but also the artificial light as well. So, you know, focusing on lighting being less harsh and finding ways to make it a little bit more indirect, I think is a really good thing. So, you know, having those window treatments that are sort of, you're able to have have some sort of control over the amount of light that's coming into the space is really important, because, you know, trying to just have that really filtered is a great thing. I always look at it like this, you know, like when the sun, like on a bright summer's day, you got the sun out, and nobody looks super flattering when there's direct light. Like when there's not a cloud in the sky, the sun coming down on everybody, it just creates really harsh shadows and nobody ever looks particularly good. You know, but then the sun might go behind a cloud, right? And if it goes behind a cloud, the cloud is actually going to filter the light and is going to make everything look a lot better, right? Everyone looks a lot more flattering when there's kind of just a few clouds in the sky, just blocking out that sun a little bit and filtering out that light. It's the same idea really with your home, right? It's kind of like golden hour. You know, golden hour, like when the sun is about to set, when you don't have that harsh light, everything looks better. Everybody looks, there's a reason photographers love that hour, because everything looks fantastic. You just have an easier time taking great photos. The same is kind of true, I think, when you're creating your interior as well, right? So especially if you're trying to create something that's really dark and moody, is having indirect light sources is going to make a massive difference. So sconces that are actually pointed against the wall that are not necessarily, they don't have an exposed bulb, maybe a fabric shade, maybe it's got a paper shade, right? We're filtering that light kind of like the clouds. Having, you know, beautiful like LED light strips, but they're not exposed, right? We're not doing the exposed thing, because that's a very 2024 trend that we're not doing. But like having them sort of, you know, under a toe kick, like in a kitchen or something, under cabinet lighting, right? Like I've got back there, beneath like a valance, for example, if you put that in your living room or something, that can be fabulous. Having it sort of a little bit more indirect, a little bit more hidden, and you just sort of see these sort of subtle glows, can make a huge difference in making a space feel really moody and really sort of kind of dark and sort of mysterious. Because the less you can have big overhead lights sort of glaring at people's faces, the less you can have uncontrolled, that's important, natural light coming into your space, the better, because you're creating something that's a little bit less harsh and a little bit more mysterious kind of in a way. And I think that makes your space look better, and it's gonna really help you get the vibe that you're looking for. Okay, next up on my list, and this one is related, but I wanted to really touch on it, and that is the importance of low lighting and glow lighting. So we just talked about like that glow with sort of LED strips, where I want to continue that for a second, because instead of, yes, it's important not to have like exposed lighting and sort of make sure everything is sort of a little bit filtered, it's also really important, I think, to really put things on dimmers so that you're able to have even more control over your artificial lights. Because again, if you are thinking of sort of finding ways to kind of control the natural light coming into your space, which is going to be really important here, also at the same time, making sure that you have control of your artificial light through things like dimmers is huge. So make sure that your lights, you know, you don't have any excuses anymore. You can buy the Philips Hue light bulbs, you can put an app on your phone, like there's technology, okay? Or you've got the little dimmers on the wall if you want to do it that way, all works. But basically, the more control you have of your artificial and having it sort of not always at kind of max brightness is going to make a huge difference in making sure your space is going to look beautiful. So as I said before, really important that we're working with sort of filtered light, and we're pointing lighting directly at, say, walls as opposed to right there in the open with bare light bulbs. Also really important that we're actually just controlling sort of the brightness that we're seeing in our light bulbs as well. So turning that down and controlling it is going to make a huge difference in making a space feel really cozy, and it's going to help you control the light that you do get in the space so that you can create something that is really dark and moody. Okay, and then my last tip for you all is to lean a little bit more into traditional. Now this is maybe my personal preference, I will be honest, but I think that, you know, when catching trends for 2024, trends like dark academia and sort of these spaces, they all seem to really incorporate in a lot of traditional elements. And I really like that. And I think it makes sense in a way, because I just think when you look at mid-century modern, you know, one of the pieces of mid-century modern was really bright open windows, right? Having minimal or no window treatments. Scandinavian design as well. These tend to be styles that are a little bit more light and bright, right? Scandinavian as a design style uses a lot of white, uses a lot of light colored flooring, uses quite a little bit of black, but it really uses black more as kind of an anchor color for the rest of the palette. But, you know, lots of grays, things like that. That makes sense for Scandinavian, and that's sort of what I see. But a lot of these traditional styles that are really popular right now, they tend to be a little bit more on the darker and moodier side, and I'm all here for it. I think it's great. I think it looks really beautiful. I also think that a lot of the wood species that were used in a lot of traditional furniture techniques tend to be a little bit darker. So, you know, moving away from not just using, of course it can, of course, but you know, the oaks and the birch and all those sorts of wood species tend to be a little bit more lighter in tone. So a lot of woods like, you know, rich mahogany or something, it tends to be wood species that are used a lot more in traditional furniture pieces. And I think that they're beautiful and they work really, really well with a dark and moody color palette. So whether it's, you know, framed beautiful art on the wall, whether it's traditional wallpapers, whether it's furniture pieces that have lots of detailing and ornamentation and things like that, I just think these spaces are beautiful and amazing and a really wonderful complement complement, I think, to this color palette. So you can use whatever style you want and still make it dark and moody. You can make a dark and moody Scandinavian space. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that those styles tend to have a color palette that oftentimes leans a little bit lighter, and this tends to be a little bit darker and moodier. And I think that that really blends well with traditional design, and also why this color palette, I think, is quite trendy at the moment, just because I think people are looking for a reaction to sort of those really light, bright, white sort of Scandi spaces that we have seen in the last several years. These spaces are dark, they're moody, they're interesting, and kind of, yeah, they're just really like almost gothic, right? You know what I mean? Like it's kind of really leaning into some sort of gothic vibes, which I think a lot of people are really enjoying. It's not for me, but I also think they're really cool, and I love seeing them in other people's spaces. Remember, like I say on this channel, just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for other people. Even though I like to make fun of stuff on my channel, I still feel like that makes sense to me. So, you know, I don't make fun of, I would say this, I respect the style even if it's not mine. You know what I mean? Some things I don't respect, and that's fine because I just think they're hideous. But this is a style I think that is beautiful and gorgeous, even if not for me. So, you know, have fun with these dark academia spaces with colored, you know, charcoal bookshelves and candles and just gothic vibe. I just think they're really fun. I think they're really cool. So have fun with your traditional pieces, bring them back in and play around with some, you know, moody wallpapers and darker colors, and let me know what you get up to, because I think it's really beautiful to look at. So thanks everybody for watching this video. Feel free to check out the next one, which is going to be how to make a space that is light and bright, which I have referenced a few times in this video. So if dark and moody isn't your vibe, then light and bright might be. So go ahead and check out that one. There's some things also in that video that I think might be helpful for a dark and moody space. I just didn't want to repeat myself too much. Go check out that video, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.